three. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Cabaret Hotspot. Today, I have a dear friend who we all know and love because he's met us millions of times at the door over at the Laurie Beachman Theater at West Bank Cafe. Welcome, Michael Kirk Lane!
Oh, Sue, how
Yay!
are you? It's good to
I'm
see
well. I'm well. I miss you.
you. I miss you too.
And I
It's
miss our
so
Kenny
good to see
Bow, and I miss your whole staff.
this virtual platform to still be able to see each other and
Yeah.
talk, keep our
Yeah.
art form alive.
Absolutely. Have you seen or talked to anybody from the club? Are you keeping in touch with any of the staff or your friends
You know,
there?
especially Kenny and I talk frequently,
Mm-hmm.
keep in touch with each other, talk about what the future could be.
Mm-hmm.
But we keep in touch, and we've got the Beachman has a staff text chain that
Yeah.
everybody checks in with each other.
Good.
You know,
Good. We
once
all we're all thinking about everybody over there. Everybody's thinking about everybody. It's been hard for everybody. So
these clubs, as you know, we all become like family,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we got
And
to
you
watch
treat
out for each other.
and you treat us like family too. Those who perform there. Today I have you on because we have been featuring your programs. I'm curious to know who pitched it. Did you go to the Y and pitch this program? You have two programs I want you to talk about. How it came to be. Let's talk about that first up at the 92nd Street Y.
I had started teaching at the 92nd Street Y, co-teaching their Exploring Cabaret Performance class prior to the pandemic shutting us all down.
Mm-hmm.
And when we had to switch to online teaching, it didn't really make sense to have two teachers via Zoom
Mm-hmm.
trying to coordinate and then coordinating with the student. You know, there's the latency issues. And so having the music director and the student, it became too much.
Mm-hmm.
So when we decided to go to one teacher, and that became Mary Feinsinger, who brought me on, and she had worked with Colette Black,
Mm-hmm.
when Colette was teaching the class there. And so they decided to take me out of that equation. But in that same time, they said, what else could we do? Let's have a brainstorm. Let's figure out what else we can do. And so one of the ideas was more from me. One idea was more from the administrators at the Y. The Cabaret Great Performances, which is now Cabaret History and Great Performances,
Mm-hmm.
was more of their idea. It came from them. And then Cabaret Conversations came from my side.
Now tell us a little bit about each of these programs. The first one went up first. The history went up. You had three classes, once a week for 3 weeks,
Once we
and then we'll talk about the second wave.
Now, Cabaret History and Great Performances, we're expanding it to 4 weeks when we offer it again in August. I believe August 10th, we start that for 4 consecutive Mondays.
Great.
And it really, we dive into the history of the art form. The first week starts in the 1890s in Paris.
Mm-hmm.
Go through the Weimar Republic, and then when we get to America, we focus on New York City.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really go into what's happening in St. Louis or Chicago or San Francisco. I focus on our world in New York City, and we go through. Week 2 is the 50s and 60s. Week 3 is the 70s and 80s, and then we finish up with the 90s and looking forward to
Mm-hmm.
what's next for the art form.
Who is your clientele? Who's signing on to see these? Is it Y members? Is it, you know,
For Cabaret History, we actually got an interesting cross section across the country, and that's something we noticed, that moving into this online format,
mm-hmm.
I had a student in Dallas, I had a student in LA, I think we had one from San Francisco. We're getting students who wouldn't be able to attend the class if we were in a more traditional setting in a room at the 92nd Street Y.
Yeah, if there's any blessing in this whole COVID thing, all of our amassing all this new knowledge and this new technology is something that none of us would have done had we not been pressed to do it. Secondly, the earning potential when things can be monetized, when programs can be presented in a way that are professional enough to charge for them, which is what you're doing right now in your productions. They look great.
History class, one of the students who was based in California used to live in New York, and so had stories that he shared in the Q&A of going to see Bobby Short play,
Mm-hmm.
and going to see Elaine Stritch of the Carlisle, and all of these legends that are no longer with us that
Mm-hmm.
he lived in New York. So that really did add to the class, and in the Q&A section, his perspective coming into it as well.
Now, as you know, David Sibel and I have just written So You Want to Sing Cabaret. And as a matter of fact, we start out in that same place with an article that Irv Rabel wrote about the history of cabaret. So that's like the
Mhm.
start of the book. But more so than that, the whole concept of the bad press of what cabaret isn't, I'm sure is being served so well by these classes in terms of we have a PR problem and that people don't really know what cabaret is, that it's this beautiful, intimate form of alternative to theater places that you can go and sit there and get this music. So that I'm sure is part of what you're doing in this history of cabaret is bringing
And
light.
that problem really came around starting in the late 70s
Yep.
as TV moved to the West Coast and cabaret lost its chance to shine
Mm-hmm.
on television. As you know, back in the 50s and in the 60s, when all of the shows were coming out of New York, their musical guests frequently came from the cabaret world.
Yeah.
And
Uh,
cabaret at that time could be a launching pad to stardom.
Yeah, Dinah Shore, Mike Douglas, they all had those kinds of performances on their shows. Nancy Lamont, I mean, was the first one I remembered seeing on Tom Snyder's show. Anyway, so it was kind of so thrilling to see people from our
But in
community.
in the 80s, she became the exception to the rule that she
Right,
still had that crossover
right,
and was still doing the morning shows that were still in New York,
right.
going and doing Regis and Kathy Lee.
Mm.
Donahue still did a little bit as well in the 80s.
Yeah. It
There's
feels
that great clip
it,
of Ruby Rims on Donahue.
Oh, any clip of Ruby Rims is great as far as I'm concerned. Ruby's the bomb. If you don't know Ruby out there, go Google Ruby
Yes,
Rims.
look up Ruby.
Stunning, as funny as she is poignant. I mean, unbelievable talent. So let's now talk about this new group of interviews that are coming up called Cabaret Conversations.
Conversations. So and this is the one that I pitched first because of the fact that there isn't a lot. There's going to be some in your book, but there's not a lot of documentation of the world of cabaret right now. Like
Hmm.
you said, it's the PR problem. All of the papers have stopped covering us as well.
Yes.
You know, Stephen Holden was the last holdout at the Times, but
Hmm.
he got he stopped covering us 5-6 years ago at
Yeah.
least.
And unless with there's a lot of online press and reviews, but unless you as a person in the industry know to go there, you
Mhm.
don't know to go
And
there. So
there is great
it's
work being done by
mhm.
you and David at Cabaret Hotspot, from Stephen
Broadway
Mosher
World. Yeah.
at Broadway World. And so there's things out there, but if you're not already in the world, you're not going to see it.
Right.
Unlike when we were on the TV shows, or
Right.
the Times was covering us, or back when Sherry was still in charge of Backstage.
Hmm. And had that actually in a print magazine. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. That's how we all grew up originally with that in the. So the conversations are one-on-one, and you have coming up is Joe Iconis, and then you're going to do Us with the Book, and then Karen Mason. Um,
I did my first one, it's a once a month series.
hmm.
So we started in June with KT Sullivan, talking about her history in the world, but also the Mabel Mercer Foundation's history.
Hmm.
So we started with KT, and then next we have Joe Icona. So we've kind of gone from the base of some history into looking forward in the art form and the work that Joe does with his performing group, the Joe Iconis and Family. And as, a newer Tony-nominated singer-songwriter and musical theater composer, how the cabaret world works for him
Hmm.
in that as well. And then, of course, we'll have you and David on to talk about your new book, which I'm very much looking forward to reading.
Yeah, we're psyched.
And then I got my delivery update from Amazon. It's on its way, they've said.
I ordered like 50 personal books to give as gifts for Christmas and whatever. They took my order away. I don't even have my author's copy yet because there were so many advanced sales that they took.
That's great, though.
It's a good problem, but I don't have my book yet. I'm like, dudes, at least send me one.
Yeah, you need one.
Yeah, David's going to send me one because he got his order and I ordered the next day and mine was taken because they had to fill orders at Amazon and stuff. So, and they're already reprinting.
That's a great problem to have.
It's a good problem. Yeah.
And then after you, I'll have Karen Mason on.
The divine Karen Mason.
Yes.
I love this.
She was on my list immediately when we started to talk about who to have on as guests in this program. And Karen, of course, was on my list. Now, this is a once a month thing.
Mm-hmm.
My list of potential guests I'd like to have, is at least 4 or 5 years long of guests that
Right.
I could do
Of
now.
course, of course. Speaking of projecting forward, we were talking off camera a little bit about what our hopes are for how the clubs are going to open. But the Beachmen, being a bigger club, I think that you guys can probably socially distance enough people to make it worthwhile to do a show there. What are you thinking could possibly happen there?
I mean, those that's the hope.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that conversation happens a little bit, one step above me, 2 steps above me with Kenny Bell, who's
Mm-hmm.
been our manager there
And
for
Steve,
almost 15
yeah.
years, and Steve Olson, who's owned the place for 43 years.
Mm-hmm.
But the conversations are starting. What does it look like? How does it work?
Mm-hmm.
What has to change in the financial model
Mm-hmm.
to make it still work for the club and for performers?
But as we said earlier, with the Y program, the potential to, if say you can only have 30 or 40 or 50 people socially distanced in the room, and you can't have anybody right up against the stage, which is the way the Beacham's laid out, and say you had someone come in to live stream and that ticket sales were pre-sales. I'm thinking, I mean, and we have a cabaret committee that's going to be working with bookers and
Mm-hmm.
and owners of the clubs to make suggestions. But, with the live streaming capacity, my uncle in Florida can see a show that he's never been able to see before. And, with all these ticketing outlets, you can just do pre-ticket sales. I guess it would have to be pre-ticket sales, though, because you'd have to know who's coming in,
I
right?
don't think, at least at the beginning, walk-in
Mm-hmm.
sales are going to be possible because, at least looking at my position of seating the room,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to need to know how many are in each party,
Where to set them.
and it's not going to become as much of a, I don't think, as much of a first come first serve for seating
Right.
as this is where I can put groups of this size
Mm-hmm.
and still socially distance people.
And still be wearing a mask and still having to protect your own health and everything with the wait staff there and everybody protected as well. Yeah, it's kind of a strange new world, but there are some advantages to learning how to do this because if an optimistic potential is that some of the bigger clubs, which I've heard, might be opening in September. Um, Great, but when will this come back at us with flu season? Is that going to develop? So we have to be ready right here where we are for whatever's going to happen in the future. So when you say that you have 50 other people that you have lined up to do, 5 more years of your conversations, be prepared to do it because you may actually want to just keep doing this. Is that in the
And
back of your head
I
to
think
keep doing this anyway?
even when we can gather in person again,
Mm-hmm.
I think there will still be a streaming element to these classes
Mm-hmm.
because, like I said, we can serve people around the whole country,
Mm-hmm.
or I mean, really, depending on time zone around the world,
Right.
to access the history class or access these conversations. And there's an aspect of each part of these in both the conversations and the history that there's a Q&A aspect to it.
Right.
So
And that
then,
kind of connects people too in a way that feels more organic and natural to, I mean, even what we're doing now, I feel like I'm really just talking to you and it's so artificial to be on the screen, but it's because it's in real time and because, we're not editing and everything. It's just kind of nice to have this interaction. So I would imagine in a class situation that helps people feel less lonely and things like that. Are you getting that feedback in your Q&A or?
yeah, it's still developing how it's going to work
Mm-hmm.
each time. As we've done a history class fully once, so now I'm looking at how to tweak that for the second one, and I definitely needed to expand it because 3 weeks was not enough to get in the history I wanted to get in, but also to feature the performers for the great performances part of it.
Mm-hmm. So you just told me you came back to town. Where were you? You were out of town for most of this, and you just came back home, and you're staying in your apartment right now. You're not coming into the city, or
I've not been into Manhattan. I got back to the city about a week ago.
did you fly?
I did fly.
How was that?
I felt entirely safe.
Good, good.
I flew Delta, and they are still one of the airlines that are
Not
limited
doing the middle seat thing, yeah.
capacity.
Yeah.
So the plane was like 50% full, and you were required to wear a mask. They gave wipes
Mm-hmm.
to everyone as we boarded, so I felt safe. I also had a direct flight.
That helps, yeah.
I didn't want to have a layover anywhere.
And have you done the subway yet? I did the subway for the first time yesterday in like 100 days. I haven't been on the subway.
No, I've basically stayed within a 1 mile square of my apartment.
Oh, there you go.
Gone out walking, done a little social distancing, walked
Mhm.
with a friend, and
Mhm.
but no, I haven't done the subway yet. I think from Astoria, I will walk into Manhattan before I'm going to want to take the train into Manhattan. That's just
It's
me personally.
it's interesting. I was surprised because, and I live in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, so they're running more trains, and I do have a transfer. So I had my husband drive me, so I didn't have to transfer because I do
Okay.
think that that's where a lot of potential stuff can happen. You know, so I went on one train. So in essence, a direct train to the city to meet with Gregory to rehearse,
Mhm.
and everyone was being very, very careful. So there was like one or two people on either ends of the seats. No one was taking the middle seat by the bar, like completely respectful of each other. Everyone had masks on except one healthcare worker in scrubs. And I'm like, dude, really? You know, I couldn't believe it. So I felt really much safer. I did wear surgical gloves though, because, you know, in the subway you're going down, and I just had knee surgery, so I have to hold on. So, you know, you're holding on to railings and stuff like that. So, but I am not as afraid of doing it, but as the city populates more and more and more and more businesses and phase 3 and 4 happen, I'm not so sure I'm going to want to do it, you know.
We'll see. I'm also waiting. I think before I venture out too much, I'm waiting for my antibody results to come back.
Hmm.
Like we said, we don't know what immunity that does provide, but
Hmm.
I'll feel a little safer being out interacting
Hmm.
once I know.
So I ask a lot of people at the end of these interviews basically to tell us if someone in their life gave them some advice, a mentor or a business associate. It could be business related or it could be theatrically related. Something that changed your life or your perspective that you think you could share with someone who's out here, or even something you want people to know during this time from you.
Oh, there someone I work with frequently is Kathy Mullen, and she worked with. She's a Muppeteer.
Mm-hmm.
Was Moki Fraggle on Fraggle Rock. She was Frank Oz's assistant for Yoda.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we were talking about the business, and I've worked with her now for 10 or 12 years. We were at a lunch talking about the business once, and she went, "No, you just have to say yes. You don't know which opportunity is going to lead to the next person, who's going to lead you to the next project.
Mm-hmm.
So
Pretty awesome.
say yes and
Say
see where it takes
yes.
you."
That's David's theme song. Say yes.
Yeah, we're going to do it.
There you go. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Michael.
Oh,
Really
thanks for having
appreciate
me,
it.
Sue.
Now, everyone who's looking at this, just scroll down, look down below this interview link, and you are going to get all the information to bring you to it's 92y.org/class/cabaret dash conversations for this next program that's coming up. But as you know, we keep everything listed, and we'll put up the history of cabaret when that comes
And if
back in
that's hard
August.
to remember, there's a section on michaelkirklane.com that has all the information for the classes as well.
And also just on Cabaret Hotspot,
Yeah.
we have you as a big banner because
Oh, thank you.
anything that's educational and or a benefit, we put up on the big banner. So just go up there, you'll see
Oh,
my face and a couple other people up there. It'll be clearly marked, and then just link on that, and that'll take you directly to how to make a reservation.
We're ready to start up again with that on July 13th with Joe Iconis.
I'll be there. I'll be
Oh,
there.
I look forward to it. It's going to be fun.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on campus soon, I hope.
Yes, back when we can be around the cabaret again.
The hardest part is not hugging the stuffing out of everybody. I don't know what I'm going to do. I mean, I don't like the elbow thing, but I'm a mama at heart, and I just want to hug everybody, and that's going to be the hardest part.
I know. I'm a hugger too.
About seeing everybody. All right, guys, have a great day, and happy 4th of July, everyone.
Yes.